what I'm about to do is to give you somewhat of a local perspective on some of the themes that Greg mentioned. This will be this is a product of two task forces that have been working for several months now, trying to investigate and understand conditions in our local area. So what I'm about to give is really should be seen as a joint effort. Our task forces talked with many elected officials, many public employers, and other individuals and leaders in our community, and they helped us very much to understand the conditions in our city, in our county, and the region. I'd like to especially mention the help that we got from Don Inks, who is the Director of the Economic Division of the Department of Community and Economic Development for the City of South Bend. Don is an extraordinarily knowledgeable individual, and he helped me enormously to understand the issues and was very helpful in being able to access the data, just exactly what we need in terms of a public employee who was helping the public to understand what's going on in our department. So it's very much appreciated. Well, I'm going to talk about competing visions, economic development in St. Joseph County. And really competing visions is kind of like what Greg was talking about in terms of the high road versus the low road. Different ways of looking at economic development. I'm going to characterize them also as the old view and the new view, with the expectation that the enormous energy and interest that's been engendered by this forum that we've been talking about and planning, I think is leading in our community to a new perspective, a new view, but that's really, in a sense, ultimately up to you. These two views, I think, were very much in evidence during an issue which was very much front-page news in our community not too long ago, and that was the campaign concerning the Tondu Corporation. When I first heard about the Tondu Corporation, it was in the context of a newspaper article that I read about the director of Project Future who went to the county council and argued, along with the support of an official from Tondu, that the prevailing wage ordinance that the county had recently passed was an obstacle to attracting Tondu to our community. This was a $1 billion investment, enormous boon to the community, but they really were questioning whether they wanted to come because of the prevailing wage ordinance. The prevailing wage ordinance said at the county level, if you got a tax abatement, you're required to pay construction workers the prevailing wage, which is generally a union scale wage. Unfortunately, from my perspective, the county council, in a very narrow vote, rescinded their prevailing wage ordinance. And then the Tondu presence in our neighborhood became much more evident. This engendered a mobilization, a tremendous grassroots mobilization, one of the strongest I've seen in many years of observing these kind of things, of citizens concerned about this investment, concerned about the dangers to the air, dangers to the water, concerned about their quality of life that this proposed investment would bring. So they mounted a campaign. Then we heard about a secret negotiation, and we found out about this through the help of archivist Tracy Grimm, who, through the Freedom of Information Act, obtained a copy of this memorandum of agreement. And it was really a secret negotiation that was being conducted that would offer enormous tax subsidies to the Tondu Corporation. Well, I think needless to say that engendered even more outrage and opposition among the community, and the vote at the county council level was 7-2 to reject the Condu Corporation. So I think in this kind of scenario, you see both the old and the new in evidence. The old way of doing business and citizens mobilizing to present a different way, a different view. The fact that it was not unanimous indicates the two visions are still there, and there'll be further discussion and debate and about them. So let's look at that a little more in depth. And what I'm going to do is really try to look at very concretely what is happening at our local level. It's a very local presentation. Trying to take the ideas that Greg talked about nationally and look at them in our specific situation. Okay. Everybody see this okay? Okay, I'm going to define what I call the old view. First of all, it's the idea that we need to create a, quote, good business climate in order to attract business. It involves large tax subsidies. I won't belabor it because this is what Greg certainly was talking about. And as we say also in our leaflet, with no strings attached. In other words, really pretty much any location or industry is good if the tax base increases. And we certainly don't want any wage standards or other benefits required, as evidenced by the opposition to the prevailing wage ordinance, and also as evidenced by the opposition several years earlier to a similar living wage ordinance that had been proposed. Also, this takes place with relatively limited, I won't say none, but relatively limited community input. Well, the argument for this approach, this is exactly what Greg was talking about. Business location decisions depend on subsidies. They're key to the decision that the business makes. And if we don't pay the subsidy, Mishawaka will, and they'll get it, or Elkhart will, or Michigan will, or some other community, and we're really over a barrel. You know, we have no choice. We may think it's not the kind of subsidy we want to give. It may not be the best use of our tax money, but in a sense, there's no choice. Cities have no choice. And moreover, there are no costs to this approach. The idea here is that, well, since we never would have attracted the companies without the subsidies, if we didn't grant the subsidies, they wouldn't be here. And so therefore, any jobs that they create, any taxes that we collect, however diminished by tax subsidies, are all to the good. In other words, we got something that we never would have gotten if we hadn't given away this tax money. You know, it's a powerful argument, and I think a very number of many people feel that the box didn't buy it. But I think Greg did a wonderful job in arguing that tax subsidies are not as critical to the business location decision as they might be portrayed to be. And I think there are indeed a number of significant costs to this approach. So what are those costs? Well, first of all, this pressure to keep wages competitive. In other words, if we want to compete with other areas, you know, we want to make it profitable for businesses to come, so we have to keep our wages low. And we can see this in evidence if we go to, for instance, the website of Project Future, called by the Chamber of Commerce as the Economic Development Agency for the county. You'll see over here, right here, I don't know if you can see this, but it says hot properties, and there's a picture of Blackthorn. And Blackthorn is industrial development in the northwest part of our city. And that's blown up a little bit so you can see it better. And Blackthorn has a corporate part there, has their own website. And if we go to that, there's a section there called employment costs. Now don't try to read it, I know you can't. But again, I made it a little easy for you. And I put this up. This is what's on their website. I'll let you read it. So we are advertising companies to come to our area because our wages are so low. I don't know if this, well, you can make your own conclusions. I think it's a cost of this approach. Okay, there's another cost, and that is what I call limited accountability. When we give tax abatements, we generally have certain expectations, and they are relatively minimal, at least, that the companies will stay in town for the length of their abatement. We generally project a 10-year period. They should be here at least 10 years for giving them this break. And secondly, they should comply with the promises that they made in applying for the tax abatement, so that is the jobs that they promised. By the way, I assume everybody knows what a tax abatement is. It's simply a deduction from your property tax. And they can be for a number of years, and you pay nothing at the beginning, and you progressively pay more of your property tax as the length of it increases. We do have some, in our law, potential repercussions of not complying with the tax abatement. And you can actually be required to pay back all abated taxes if a company would leave town. This is the clawback that Greg referred to. And there's also a provision that says your abatement can be ended if you're not in compliance. In other words, you don't make due on the promises that you made. Plus partial repayment of abated taxes, and plus fines of up to $2,500 for each, quote, failure to perform. This is in South Bend's tax abatement law. Well, what happens if companies don't comply? Well, we have an example of Accuride Company. This left South Bend in 2002 in the 8th year of a 10-year tax abatement. The action by the city was that the abatement was ended, but there was not a requirement that taxes were repaid. How about if they don't keep their promises with regard, for instance, to jobs? Well, in November 2004, the City Council held a hearing and called in 5 companies that hadn't kept their promises with regard to jobs that they said they were going to create. And they were asked why, and the companies said, well, 9/11 happened, the weak economy, it affected our business. You know, we wanted to create the jobs, but we couldn't. Well, the lack of compliance was excused by the Common Council, though I really can't blame the Common Council for this action, because there is a state law which says if you don't comply with the promises you made in your tax abatement, because of factors that are beyond your control, then you can't be held accountable, essentially. And I think the Common Council felt really there was not too much that could be done. Well, it is in the state law. However, don't tell NIPSCO this. If you haven't paid your heating bill, they'll come in to disconnect your heat. I mean, hello, I lost my job, and I can't pay my bill. Oh, that's okay. Don't worry about it. It's beyond your control. Well, that'd be nice. Well, really, this is not what you could do with any regular business contract either. I mean, if you're a company, you have a contract, you order supplies from another company, you plan to use them and sell them, your business has fallen off, you really can't sell them. You can't call the company back up and say, you know, thanks for delivering these, but due to factors beyond our control, we can no longer sell them, so we can't pay you. Well, you'd be really laughed out of the room. But yet, unfortunately, it's just the same logic we are applying to accountability issues with our property tax. And I don't want to use words inappropriately, but I can't help but come to the conclusion that this lack of accountability turned what could be a legitimate contract into something that, I don't know the other word for it other than corporate welfare. Welfare in the sense that you expect to get this money without really having to keep your end of the bargain. All right, well, let's look at some numbers. What is the current situation? In South Bend, we currently have 68 companies with tax abatements. There are currently 29 who have created fewer jobs than they had promised. Michiana, which relies on tax abatements far less than South Bend does, has 8 companies, and 5 of them have created fewer jobs than promised. Now, there's a promising new initiative that the Common Council in South Bend passed relatively recently. And I think it's very interesting because it says explicitly in that ordinance, and I quote it up there, that this is a contractual arrangement. This is a contract. This is not some kind of free subsidy money that you're entitled to get. It's a contract. We're providing something, we expect you to provide something. And it establishes the principles that this is not welfare. There's an elaborate system of social benefit points that are created. We have a little handout on the table that lists all the different points that you can get, and you should take a look at it. So I think it's really very important, very significant. I commend the Common Council for passing this. However, I think it could be better. Most of the points, or not most, but a good number go for large projects. The single largest component of the points, 210 out of approximately 1,000, go to supersized projects. You don't get any more points, ironically, strangely, for creating more jobs. If you say you create one job, you'll get the same number of social benefit points than if you say you create 250 jobs. You don't get any points for paying higher than market wages. The market wages means like what everybody else is paying. And we know that many of those market wages, as Greg was referring to, are often poverty wages. So you get points for paying the market wage. We could give points for paying higher than the market wage, but we don't. And there's no points for not polluting the air, the water, or the workplace. It doesn't enter in. So these are some possible improvement in the concept, in the structure of the ordinance. Well, how is it played out? How is it actually working in South Bend? It's only been a couple of years, so I think this is really probably only preliminary look at it, but let's see what we can. There's 11 companies who applied for abatements under this new ordinance. No companies claim points under the categories of child care or assistance for transportation. One of the items that Greg was talking about. You can get social benefit points for helping with transportation expenses or with helping for housing. I mean, all notable goals, but unfortunately, the ordinance didn't have the effect of changing the behavior of any companies. They could still get the abatement by not doing these things. And interestingly, every single one of the companies, 100%, claim points for providing health benefits and training and paying prevailing wages. Prevailing wages? Wasn't that what we had heard was such an obstacle to companies wanting to come to our area? I think we really need to look into this and see just what exactly are they doing? Are they really paying prevailing wages? Have they submitted a certified payroll so that we know that they indeed are, or are they just saying they intend to, perhaps? When they say they're doing training, what does that mean? You know, how extensive is the training? Does it mean showing someone how to do the job, turn on the switch and you're all set, or is it more significant? When we say health benefits, does it mean they offer a plan, whether it's affordable or not, to their employees? What does it exactly mean? So I think these are questions, perhaps a little too early to make any firm conclusions about them, but I think we really need to really need to know. And I think we need to give the staff, the hard-working staff that's trying to keep up with this, the resources that they need to indeed be able to let the public know what's going on. Okay, well, that's the second cost, limited accountability. Another issue I want to look at is what are the implications of the tax subsidies that we're giving out? We know what's going on. What does it mean? Well, first of all, let's start with a little data on what the magnitude of these tax subsidies is. For South Bend, in 2005, the taxes that were paid on projects that were subject to abatement, 3.9 million. Taxes not paid on abated projects, 4.8 million. There's a second area of subsidy that Greg referred to, and this is called a TIF. A TIF stands for Tax Increment Financing, and how a TIF works is that there's a geographical area that's created called a TIF district, and within this area, the incremental assessed property value is subject to being focused on the TIF area for various projects. So in other words, when you create the TIF area, there's a certain level of property values. Once you create the area, new businesses move in, existing businesses expand, they increase their assessed value. The taxes on that new assessed value doesn't go to the regular place. It goes to the TIF district. I'll say more about that in just a minute. But let's look at what the magnitude of that is right now. In South Bend, the tax revenue that was diverted to TIFs in 2005 was $9.8 million. Of that, the largest TIF area, called the Blackthorn area, the one I was referring to earlier, 6.2 million. For the Michiana TIF, even bigger, 13.3 million. They have 3 TIF areas. $12.3 million was generated from their largest TIF. They call it the Northwest TIF, but I call it the Grape Road TIF. Because that's where it is. Grape Road, Main Street, that whole area. These TIF districts collect a lot of money, and they have a lot of money as of 12/31/2005. You see the numbers here, 15.1 in all the TIF districts in South Bend, 10.6 in Blackthorn, 26.0 million in Michiana, of which $24.3 million was cash on hand at the end of last year. This is not to say that money is sitting around and no one can figure out what to do with it. There are certainly projects planned to use it, but it's still a lot of money. You see up here, it says St. Joseph County, question mark, question mark. And if you noticed, when we talked about tax abatements and compliance and the other data that I talked about, we had no data from the county. The county doesn't maintain the staff like the cities of South Bend and Mishawaka do that regularly keep track of this information. However, we did go to Project Future, the economic development agency for the county, and we asked them, could you help us with some data for the county outside South Bend and Mishawaka, and with data for tax abatements and TIFs. And we also asked them, by the way, about their perspective, their plans, their program goals and strategies for economic development in the county. And by the way, we very specifically invited the director of Project Future to come to this conference. The response we got was, gee, we don't have any of that data. We don't have most of what you asked for. There's some things we could provide you with, maybe a map of one of the TIF districts, but that's about it. So I said, well, please send us what you have, and perhaps you could direct us to where we could get the other information. I'm kind of surprised that, although you don't collect this information, I'm surprised you don't have it, because don't you need this information to evaluate your programs and what you're doing? Well, after that, we got no response. So unfortunately, that's why the question marks are up there.